All right. Welcome in to another Buzz Beat. As we were getting the countdown to come on, we had someone that wanted to join the chat. So Drayson is here. And I think that he sensed we were getting ready to talk the misery that was the Hornets trade deadline. So we're going to talk about that today. Jalen McDaniels, um, what didn't happen, what did happen, Mason Plumlee. I think we'll probably be on the same page on most of this, but maybe not on some of it. So let's jump right in. I'm gonna throw it to you first, BG. Give me some Jalen McDaniels thoughts. He was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers in a three-team trade that saw Matisse Thybulle go to Portland and 2 second-round picks come back to Charlotte. So kick us off here because I'm going to just take a breather.
All good. Coach. I mean, I think all of us before the season envisioned McDaniels to have a productive season. The opportunity was there. He seemed like a guy that would fit in terms of what Steve Clifford was looking for. And, newsflash, but 6'9", toolsy wings that can shoot a little bit. Those guys, usually find a home in the NBA. Late second round pick in 2019, McDaniels kind of saw his role just increase bit by bit each and every season. And again, you could really see it coming on ahead of this year. The opportunities were there. I think he's done a pretty nice job taking advantage of them. I know the 3-point shot after a hot start cooled a little bit, but he can at least take and make threes for a team like the Sixers that just got rid of Matisse Thybulle in this deal, the guy that is not going to shoot threes. Philadelphia adds another wing and another guy that can defend multiple positions. He can navigate some screens. He can use his length to contest and be bothersome when he's doing, if you got him trying to fight over the top. But again, he can switch if the Sixers are looking to do some of that. And as has been discussed by probably all of us at various times on this pod, like he's a sneaky good weak side rim protector. Not a crazy, in terms of like shot block numbers or whatever, but it does feel like once every 2 or 3 games, he kind of does surprise people by just, rotating, being on time and using his length and athleticism to make plays at the wing. I just think he's a versatile defender. We've seen him do a lot of stuff in terms of on ball, the ability to switch, the ability to navigate screens, and then the off-ball stuff, being the long arm guy that's in gaps, digging for steals, and then of course the weak side rim protection. And I don't know, he was having a nice season. And if the Sixers are looking for someone, like if they're trying to get a little bit of a shot in the arm in terms of pace, I mean, McDaniels is not a guy that I expect to be on the ball much, but if he is going to get minutes for them, which we'll see, like he's a guy that 1 to 2 times per game, can grab and go in transition. And I think he'll do a nice job just kind of fitting in and playing off their two superstars there. So I really like this move for Philadelphia. And, we'll see. For a while, I thought McDaniels was the kind of guy that profiled as a wing that could play in the postseason. And, we'll see if he gets the opportunity to do so now with the Sixers on a team that has, legitimate title aspirations, or at least hopes to come out of the Eastern Conference. Salute to Jalen McDaniels. I kind of thought there was a chance that he'd be back in Charlotte, perhaps on a new deal this offseason, but it looks like Charlotte didn't want to pony up for Jalen McDaniels at what would be I think a reasonable contract, but certainly a large raise over his relatively small, former second round pick contract. So they made that decision, and then they went out and got something in return for it. Lee, where are you on or Spencer, whomever wants to get in here, where are you guys on the value they got in return? But actually, before we get there, just maybe even some thoughts also on the decision to actually part ways with McDaniels as opposed to, bringing him back for a second contract.
Yeah, I mean, we did our 5 most likely guys to get traded podcast, whatever that was, like a week and a half ago. And I was pretty convinced the Hornets wouldn't trade McDaniels. I mean, maybe that was naive considering he was starting to bubble up, in some rumors for kind of, contending teams that were looking to add another piece. And I mean, that's exactly what happened. So, maybe I should have taken those reports a bit more seriously. And like, if you look at this trade in a vacuum without nuance and context, Kupchak in the front office took a late second round pick and they turned that into 2 second round picks and Sivy Mikhailuk, I guess, if you want, if we want to include him in this, a player who I love out of Kansas, but not because he's a great player. I just love him because he's my kind of player. I feel like he's a guy that will be getting 45 in the YMCA men's league, when he's 45. So that's why I like him, not because he's particularly going to be very useful for this Hornets team. So like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you looked at it in a vacuum without nuance or context, the Hornets took a late second round asset and turned it into what will likely be 2 higher second round picks. But then when you introduce the context and nuance of the skill set that Jalen provides with where this roster is heading and in the current NBA format with a homegrown developmental talent, it does start to become fairly confusing as to exactly why they would do this. Like, if you look, like, if the Hornets just didn't do this, if the Hornets just moved Plumlee for Reggie Jackson's buyout contract and the second round pick, I think we would be in a much different kind of mindset and vibe. Although, like, there still probably would be a little bit of a sense of like, okay, that's all we did. But that would seem like a very like common sense base case outcome for this trade deadline. But then you throw this kind of head scratcher in, and it just all the same emotions start to be restirred on kind of, no confidence in this decision making apparatus to make what we would hope to be sound decisions. And I echo your comments, Brian, on the fact that I'm happy for Jalen. I think seeing him in, frankly, Philadelphia, who's one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now, like, it'll be interesting to see him in the playoffs. Spencer, I'll kick it over to you kind of on perfect timing with this YouTube comment we've got from Ryan, which is, if you're not re-signing McDaniels, this trade is fine, I guess, which I think there is maybe a kernel of truth in, but still, like, just kind of talk through, your opinion on what the Hornets could have done in re-signing McDaniels versus, if there was some communication that he wouldn't be returning or kind of whatever.
Yeah, and you guys both laid it out real nicely. Let me just preface all this. If this cuts out, I'm alone with a 2.5-year-old this week. He goes to school during the day, takes a nap in the afternoon, but he's awake now, so I don't have a better.
We'll hold down the fort
half here to help me out. So if I have to jump off, that's what that was about.
BuzzBeat is a family program. We're a family program.
Hey, we hustle. That's what we do over here.
And if we have to do some offense for defense subbing down the stretch here, we can manage the situation.
We will play a junk defense. We are not above that. So, yeah, I have quite a few thoughts on this trade. When it first came across, I thought, wow, okay, they were able to scrape out a first-round pick from either Portland or Philly presumably, since they were getting McDaniels, because I had it kind of implanted in my mind, this developmental success story, 6'9", 6'10" wing, who's a 3-and-D player, who projects, like Brian said earlier, is a playoff rotational, asset across the league. I think moving forward, like, how could Charlotte move off of him without really a serious asset coming back? So when I saw 2 second-round picks and Mikhailuk, I mean, he just is there to make the salary make sense. I just don't understand it. This is not a franchise with a history of player development. You can't, number two, you can't have enough of these kind of wings on your roster in the league. Number three, I understand that, this team does have some expiring contracts coming up, notably PJ Washington is a restricted free agent. Jalen McDaniels will be an unrestricted free agent, but he's coming off of a 4-year contract. So the Hornets still have his bird rights, would have had his bird rights. Now the Sixers do. So they can offer more years and more money than the rest of the league. Number four, of course, you're bidding against the rest of the league if you take it into the offseason. But guess who's not turning down the most years and the most dollars as the 52nd overall pick? Is Jalen McDaniels. He's going to take that deal, and so is his agent. And if he really doesn't want to be in Charlotte, then that presents a sign and trade opportunity, which is becoming more popular in this league. So to trade him now at the deadline for what's probably going to be like the 33rd, 34th pick is just lacks so much creativity and so much foresight.
You're going to draft a player that you hope turns out to be Jalen McDaniels. Like, that's the thing. So that you can not re-sign that player in 3 or 4 years too. Like, that's
exactly
part of the frustration.
And just the lack of investment, I think, from this franchise in its own. And again, this is not a franchise that drafts real well, so they don't have a lot of their own to retain. But the lack of foresight to invest in what you have seen grown in-house is just wild to me. I mean, but we all know what this is, and we've had this conversation on this podcast a lot of times. This is a cheap owner and a monetarily miserable franchise that will cut every single corner to save $2 or $3 million. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
You got the main points out of the way.
Yeah, you did. It is like, I guess I don't have like a great other sort of analog to compare this with, like right off the bat, but just it is in a vacuum. I think a lot of the stuff that Charlotte does, you're like, okay, that's fine. Like they made a decision. They didn't want to pay to bring Jalen McDaniels back. They traded him. They got some second-round picks. Probably not the best bit of business, but like it's a thing, right? You're at least getting something for. You would theoretically lose this player for nothing. But it is just amazing. Like there's just such a trend line of this. Like the constant inability to retain players that you draft is sort of like astonishing. I mean, you look at this roster, and I know some of the circumstances have pushed things in a different direction, but like the amount, like they've signed like basically like 2 draft picks to second contracts since when? Like when was the last? Like I mean, they brought back Cody Martin. And I guess if you want to call the Devontae Graham sign and trade,
they were getting ready to this summer.
Which that's the circumstance that sort of like changes everything. And look, it seems like they're going to try to bring PJ Washington back. I think that's like a good decision. As we
do we think that this informs that at all? Like, does this have any impact for y'all on?
I guess it could.
The likelihood that PJ comes back.
I guess it could, but it's like Spencer said. Like they could have paid both guys. You know what I mean? They could have done it. But it does make me think like I think they were already planning to bring PJ back. This does sort of like add a little more fuel to that. Unfortunately, like I hadn't even been considering this guy until. His name was brought up online earlier, but just like the thought of like how Bridges like fits into the picture potentially is just like I hadn't even considered it, man. Like if this is something they're continuing to still like seriously entertain, again, I've condemned it multiple times on this podcast. I think it's pretty bleak, and they even shot those reports down. I thought the other day not the other day, but a couple of months ago. Regardless, it's just nuts to see how few guys they've brought back. Because again, like Devontae, they signed and traded, that turned into Mark Williams. So like, I guess that counts too. But man, it's like Malik Monk gone, Devontae Graham gone, Miles Bridges, who knows? PJ Washington like probably back, Jalen McDaniels gone, Martin here, and then obviously LaMelo will be the one to he'll sign hopefully the rookie extension the first second he can, but. I mean, they didn't have a first-round pick in 2016. Frank Kaminsky didn't make it to a second contract. Noah Vonleh didn't make it to a second contract. Like, it's just Cody Zeller's the last guy, And yeah, it's not looking like
he ain't making it to his second contract.
Yeah, not unless something like really drastic happens.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
anyways. I don't know. That's probably about all I got on. We should say too. Someone mentioned, I didn't see this. Did Kelly Oubre say something about? Coming back?
He made a comment. I mean, I haven't verified it, but it would seem like a reputable Twitter kind of source saying that Kelly basically made some comments around like, I really hope I'm not involved in the trade deadline. I like this staff. I like this team. Like, I'd like to be back, stuff like that. So
he's played well. Kelly's played pretty well. I could see if a guy like that who, is having the best season and is probably in line for somewhat of a payday this offseason. I could see why he would maybe want to be back, but like, I don't really know. Like, I didn't even consider the possibility of them like re-signing Kelly Oubre this offseason. I gotta be honest with you, like that wasn't in the list of priorities for me.
No, I mean, so James in the comments says it was a Rod Boone interview, which would make sense when I saw it on Twitter.
Okay.
I know this is probably like not necessarily a majority opinion, and I know it's like very, very apples and oranges. But like, I would just rather straight up have Jalen McDaniels than Kelly Oubre at this point.
Oh my God! Times a million.
Yeah,
times
I mean,
it's not even close. Yeah,
it's really not
younger and better at defense.
Right, like that's all you have to say. And so it's like, and again, I'll go back to my like optimistic thesis of, whatever's going to happen with the Miles Bridges situation, whatever our opinions are, look, it's just possible he's going to be on this roster next year. And look, he's a very good basketball player. So like, if the Hornets do this tank job correctly, if they get a top 2 pick, and if they are trying to be competitive next year, the main point I'm trying to make here is Jalen McDaniels would be a very useful player to have on the roster if they're trying to win ball games next year. So that's where and Kelly Oubre, frankly, would not. He's not a winning player. I'm sorry. Like he is a volume inefficient shooter that doesn't guard. And that just doesn't fly in today's NBA if you actually want to win at any sort of competent level.
It's like, I mean, you can just real quickly, like on Oubre, like I know he's hurt right now. Maybe that complicates some things, but like this was a seller's market. People were looking for like scoring and wings at the deadline. And, I mean, was there anything? I mean, I guess he occasionally popped up in rumors or whatever. But I think a lot of teams looked at those numbers and said, not legit. And this guy doesn't help us as like our 8th man in the playoffs,
Yeah, it's interesting with Oubre. I get maybe the injury thing had more of an impact than I accounted that it would. And I kind of expected him even after the deadline today. I was like, well, I wouldn't be surprised if in a few hours we hear like the Hornets and Oubre are, negotiating a buyout right now. But anyways, to tie the bow on the McDaniels thing, because I did this exercise today, because I think there was a percentage of kind of Hornets Twitter, which most of us probably had a tough time staying away from today, that, thought, well, we don't want to overpay Jalen McDaniels. And even then, we have to compete with the rest of the NBA because unrestricted free agent. I laid out how the Hornets have the advantage over the rest of the league earlier. But, like, we could have – and here's the exercise. I was like, oh, I forgot about Miles Bridges. So I was like, okay, he's lost all his value in the league. But there has been that one report out there the Hornets would like to bring him back. So I said, start him at $10 million next year. Start McDaniels at $15 million. Maybe he gets less, maybe he gets more. I don't know, but we'll start him there, 8% raises. Start PJ Washington at $20 million. Then sign what right now is projected to be the 4th overall pick and the 29th overall pick, Denver's. All of that combined, and Nick Richards, re-signed him. I think I started him at $5 or $6 million. So plugged all these numbers, they still come in like $7 or $8 million below the luxury tax. And that's a full roster. That's what I mean. You're really not signing any free agent at that point. You could use your mid-level exception or a portion of it, but like that's buying in to what you're doing on an age timeline, on an age curve that makes sense, right? And to me, and the second part of that is, so anyways, it has nothing to do with PJ Washington and Jalen McDaniels playing the same position. Has nothing to do with not being able to afford him. I just – you can't replace Jalen McDaniels now. You bought a lottery ticket is all that you did. That's all the Hornets did. So just to kind of tie a bow on that, it's a very frustrating deal. Anything else on McDaniels before we pivot to Mason Plumlee?
I think I'm good here.
Yeah,
let's hit the plum dog.
I think the only thing else I would say that might send sparks coming out of Spencer's ears is that we'll probably just end up selling one of those picks. So
they've got so many second round picks in the coffers
I'm out if we do that.
Yeah, they've got a lot. Like they've got a lot. Looking ahead in terms of second round picks, kind of at their disposal here, and I mean they're just not going to use all of the. Like there's just no way all of those get used. So it's like.
By the way, second rounders were like freaking oil today. Like
it was. I mean, it was just like money laundering across the league. You know what I mean? Just like helping teams like duck the tax and stuff like that. Like, give me a second round pick, and I'll eat this salary for you, and
the Bucks have traded 20,000 gallons of oil for another backup dog.
It's cash, man. You can't. There's no paper trail on this. You can just burn it.
Exactly.
True. We need to bring the IRS into this. Mea culpa on second round picks. There's something going on here.
It is also, hold on, real quickly. James Helton brought up in the comments they'll trade 5 second rounders for John Collins, lol, which like I wouldn't hate it. But like it is funny that like after the dust settled after this and like I know Miles Turner just extended with the Pacers and maybe he gets moved at some point again. But like after all of this, John Collins is still with the Hawks and Miles Turner is still with the Pacers. Like it's like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have changed teams. So like those dudes are like holding strong. It's amazing.
It's a great point. The John Collins things. I mean, that's ridiculous. But to truly tie a bow on this, so. Let me pull this up. So, yes, the Hornets get their own pick back from Philly. So that could be anywhere from number 31 to right now, I think it sits at 34. And apologies if one of you guys said this earlier. And then the other pick in this deal, 2027 second round selection from Portland. It will be whichever is the better of the second rounders involving the Blazers and the Pelicans. Rod Boone, credit on that one from the Charlotte Observer. That's that. Mason Plumlee. All right. Mason Plumlee was traded to the Clippers in exchange for Reggie Jackson, who is going to be bought out in a 2028 or 29. 28. I can't remember exact 2028 second rounder from the Clippers, which is somewhat intriguing. I mean, who knows where the Clippers are going to be by then.
Exactly.
So like for Plum Dog, I'm in on that deal. That's all we ever asked for was a second rounder that wasn't top 55 protected or something stupid like that. I don't really think there's a whole lot to discuss about this deal. I mean, we had all talked about, and I talked about earlier today in a little video preview of the deadline. I did, the Clippers, one of the 3 teams I thought was a good fit for Mason Plumlee, really one of 2. I thought it was Portland or the Clippers. Boston had been linked to him, but that one never really made a ton of sense. Plum Dog gets an opportunity to be on a contending team, which I think is cool because he's had a really good season. I think he's been one of the, feel-good stories in Charlotte. The Hornets get a pick down the road that, I mean, in 2028, again, with the Clippers and the history of that franchise, and you got to think Paul George and Kawhi Leonard probably neither are on that team at that point. Who knows where they are? That could be an intriguing pick there. So, yeah, what do you think, Lee?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the common sense deal. I mean, this is the deal Hornets Twitter and the Buzzbeat pod were just waiting for. Of course, it didn't come until like 30 minutes before the deadline. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I guess maybe there was a bidding war, for Plumlee, and the 2028 second rounder just was what sent Mitch over the moon. I mean, if I wanted to nitpick this trade, it would be like, could they not have gotten them to throw in like Moussa Diabate or something like that? But I'm not gonna like lose any sleep over it necessarily. I mean, or your boy Jason Preston, Spencer, like something like that. But I think this is fair value probably for Plumlee. I mean, I've kind of like cautioned fans not to expect even like a fake first round pick for Plumlee, and that certainly didn't come to fruition. Reggie Jackson's going to be bought out. I think that's already been reported a couple different places, so he won't even jump on a flight to Charlotte.
No surprises there.
No surprise at all.
That was always happening.
And this is not, I'm not breaking any news here, but like the main benefit, even above the pick in my mind for this trade, is the fact that we will see Mark Williams and we will see Nick Richards, getting all of the center minutes, or should be getting all of the center minutes. Maybe with some PJ sprinkled in there, but like,
I would love if Cliff starts playing PJ for like 28 minutes per game.
Yeah, he's gonna all of a sudden pivot to PJ to 5. Like,
your hand has been forced, sir.
And look, maybe even this means like, do we see a sprinkling of Kai again here or there? I mean, granted, he's played Kai at the 4 more than anything else, but again, like the best thing, I just want to reiterate that, like the best thing to have come from this deadline is the fact that the chokehold that Mason Plumlee had on the starting center position is now gone. And, there's a couple different guys in the comments, James and Shmee, that are, pontificating on like who's going to start. I'm not really sure I even care. I mean, I think it'll be Mark, to be honest. I think he's been ahead mostly in the rotation over the past month, and he's played really well. But I'm not sure it matters to me. Like, just split the duties 50-50 and let's see what we got.
Yeah. Agreed. And like, Mark Williams has played well when he's gotten minutes, and he totally earned. This wasn't like a charity case or like, a mandate from the top down. Like, I think Mark Williams deserves playing time. I think his play has been one of the lone bright spots for this team in recent weeks and months. And for Richards, it sucked because like he was having a career year too, right? I mean, he was, again, during his stint when he was the backup center, he too was one of the few bright spots. He was playing so well that he was keeping probably PJ off the floor at 5 a little bit more, and he was keeping Mark Williams from ascending earlier on. So the writing was on the wall. Like, we talked about this move for months now. Like, it had to happen. And like, just real quickly on the way out the door, like, salute to Mason Plumlee. He played really well this season. And, I mean, he's got kind of a weird, quirky game, the left-handed shot, the opposing benches reacting at it. But, like, that dude was staring down 2 guys that are probably 10 years younger than he is, coming for his lunch. I mean, I know they're teammates, but it's like, this is dog-eat-dog stuff. And, like, the guy played the best basketball of his career when he absolutely had to have it. I think if there had been any slippage, who knows, maybe – I know Steve Clifford's so trusting of like a veteran center, but who knows, maybe the shift would have come earlier. I do think like ultimately getting the second round pick out in the distance, I think like it's interesting because I think in general that's good practice when it comes to like first round picks, especially, on some of these sort of like win now, top-heavy teams with aging, massive veteran salaries on the roster. But I do think it's one of those things that you kind of wish you could have it now. You know, it's just like a second-round pick in 2028. It's just like, you know, the city of Miami is going to be like underwater by the time the Hornets get to like use that pick, and like so you kind of wish it was like a little more tangible, but I do think like in practice it's good to throw those things out there and have something.
Well, that's what OKC did to the Clippers. I mean, they pushed out a lot of those first round picks, which was smart, I think, you know?
Yeah. And I do think like I'll be curious to see like come playoff time, like how much Plumlee actually plays. Like you could also see it like in the playoffs, like the Clippers go small and play Zubac at center. You know what I mean? So it's like 48 minutes of center are like Nick Batum and Zubac or whatever.
Yep.
But I think in certain matchups, Plumlee gives you some depth. He can eat innings for you in the regular season, and he's a little like insurance policy for Zoo. You know, if he were to get hurt or whatever. And if if you're getting matched up against Jokic, like he gives you one more kind of like mobile, big guy to try to throw at him. I don't think he's going to do much against in that matchup, but in theory, I guess he presents another option. And I do think like offensively, like the Clippers are like they're like 25th, 20 somewhere between 20 and 25 in offensive efficiency right now. Not like I expect,
good. Yeah.
No, it's not. And not like I expect Plumlee to like immediately jump them into top 10 status. And I know they're weird because of like how the load management and how they play their stars, but Plumlee's the guy that you can get the ball to and you can get a little movement going. It kind of feels like them. They went out and they got Bones Highland, who's kind of like a pacey young
Eric Gordon.
Yeah, exactly. And so it kind of feels like they got guys that can amp the pace up. Plumlee gives you someone that you can throw the ball to and just get movement cutting off of him. And he can play pick and roll with your like star wings. So he makes a lot of sense for the Clippers, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you both just kind of said it. Like Clippers had a great deadline. I think the Lakers did too. Clippers improved their transition offense and they improved their half court offense. And that's I'm excited to watch Plumlee with either Kawhi. I'm sure they'll stagger him coming off the bench with either Kawhi or PG in there. But yeah, you can't just dribble down the floor every single time and throw it to one guy at the elbow and just be like, okay, go to work. I mean, that's what they do. That's why their offense stinks. Basically. Anyways, going back on the Plumlee deal, I when it came across, I was like, okay, Reggie Jackson, and then I went and looked. I was like, okay, he makes $2 more million than Plumlee, and Ballmer's paying probably like $50 million in repeater tax. So like we're saving them tens of millions of dollars here. That adds up to like 20 second round picks if you actually want to do the math. So I was like, if there's nothing coming back here, I'm going to be mad. But then I immediately started to talk myself down because I was like, Nick Richards, Mark Williams, finally, we get to watch these two, eat up the center minutes. And like you guys mentioned, PJ Washington getting some of those minutes. But you were talking.
I bet Steve Ballmer's got like a really cool plane that MJ gets to like use twice a year now or something, something like that.
Maybe for a second round pick or something. Just get a flight every now and then. But I do think that it is interesting. You guys were talking Mark Williams versus Nick, who starts. I think for Mark Williams, like I've seen enough during his rookie season to where I'm like, this guy's gonna be pretty damn good. I'm not too worried about it at this point. I would like to see Nick Richards against starting centers in this league. I mean, I would love to see Mark Williams in that situation too. I just think that Nick Richards this is his true test, like here from the rest of the season, right? Because he's a free agent. Like the Hornets have to pay to bring him back. And I think the rest of the league has enough tape on him, at least from earlier in the year, where it's like, this guy can play. He definitely belongs in the NBA. He might just be a backup center, but like he's not a bad player. I mean, he's a space eater, right? I mean, he's gonna muck what up in the paint. And there comes times in the season where you need guys like that. So I'm kind of interested to see Nick Richards in a starting role. Not to say that's exactly what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Hornets throw him out there against the hardest competition, the hardest matchups, and just figure out exactly what we have here. And because it is going to play a big role this summer. Now that, of course, they couldn't afford Jalen McDaniels, so they have more money than God to spend on all these guys they need to bring back now. So yeah, those were just kind of my final thoughts on this deal. What a day for Charlotte. I mean, you kind of knew it made less than 0 cents for them not to do something. This is not how I exactly imagined it. I really didn't think Jalen McDaniels was getting traded. But yeah, any closing thoughts here?
Would just say, I've seen some people mention this in the comments. Like, I know we're talking about Plumlee leaving, and that probably opens up a little bit. That opens up not just a little bit, opens up a lot of room for Mark and Richards to really like hold down the center rotation, and maybe you get a little more Kai Jones in there as well. But perhaps without McDaniels, maybe that does unearth a little bit more PT for some of your other young wings or young hybrid guys on the roster. Kai Jones, JT Thor, maybe those guys see more playing time. I don't think they'll play well, but it is good for those guys to get minutes. And they'll probably have some good moments. Maybe it means a little more playing time for Bryce McGowan's, et cetera. So there's some of like elsewhere on the roster. I think you can see you'll see some young guys just play more by virtue of these two transactions, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to just the center position.
Yeah, I saw a question here. Sorry, Lee. James asked, is Richards unrestricted? Yes, the Hornets have his bird rights, though. They signed him to, I think, a 3-year contract. So they can retain him, in other words, without going into the weeds if they want to.
Yeah, my only kind of thought, parting, I guess, more kind of higher view thought here is, like, from a tanking race standpoint, I think this was a decent like trade deadline for the Hornets. And the reason I say that is, like, we're going to see more Richards and Williams, both solid already. I think solid NBA centers, particularly for young players, but they're not exactly going to be dragging the Hornets to win after win or anything like that at this point in their career. The 4 teams that the tank race is really on for is Houston, Detroit, San Antonio, and Charlotte. Then there's a pretty big gap to like the Orlando, Indiana group. There's like a 7-game gap there. Look, like the Lakers got marginally better. Washington didn't have a big sell-off. Toronto didn't have a big sell-off. Chicago didn't have a big sell-off. Utah even didn't really strip down. So like, the only team that really stripped down is Brooklyn, but Brooklyn got useful players back, and Brooklyn's so far ahead in the standings that's just not like a realistic thing. So, if there's any other kind of like small silver lining here, I think it's that I don't foresee any other franchise really bombing to the point of getting in that 4-team group that I laid out at the beginning. So I think it truly does kind of become, Charlotte's, they should, at the very least, hopefully have a 12.5% chance at the number 1 pick, if not a 14% chance if they can get up into the top 3 or bottom 3.
Yeah, that's the best news they've had, and I don't even know how long. Like, and I know it's, it's that news is like the absence of news, at least in the short term. But like, that's all that matters right now. And like, it does need to be kind of to at least hinting at here. Like, you have got to cut the brakes here. Like, it can be like, I think they've been like slowly leaning into it. I think what happened today indicates even more that they're leaning into it. But like, it has to be all systems go. Like, literally nothing. Like, the next 2 months, it is just like, I know these are just percentage points and whatever, but like, you just can't take any of that stuff for granted, man. And you really should be trying like hell to see if you can get a bottom 3 record. And they're close, but as James mentioned in the comments, the Spurs stripped down today. They ship off Jakob Poeltl. They moved Josh Richardson. to New Orleans in exchange for Devontae Graham, which, by the way, Devontae Graham is going to end up being a pretty costly player for the Pelicans. Cost them a first-round pick to get that guy. Thank you, and Mark Williams, to the New Orleans Pelicans. And now 4 second-round picks to unload that guy, too.
Wow.
Man, dang, that's a lot for a backup point guard. And also, like, while he was there, he was like, in the way of Kyra Lewis from playing more. It's just like not ideal for Devontae. So hopefully he gets the chance to kind of reset his his career a little bit, because things kind of went. I pulled for Devontae and things sort of went sideways for him in New Orleans. I don't think it really worked out for either party. So yeah, they stripped down, and obviously Houston, Detroit didn't move Bogdanovich, which I guess is notable. I mean, he was awesome against Charlotte the other night. You can just see, Detroit's obviously they're a mess, but they've got a lot of good young players. And Bogdanovich, he just does like what Rozier does for Charlotte. Just like there's just like a baseline competency on offense, because they have this guy that can like run around screens and shoot, and they featured him pretty heavily. Like that was the offense. It was like pick and roll with Ivy, pick and roll with Alex Burks, and then pin down actions for Bogdanovich. So they kept him. So I guess that's another small potential good thing for Charlotte if you want to go deep on it. But all that matters now is the next 2 months, getting a bottom 3 roster, and then just doing whatever you need to do to try to get the lottery luck. That's all that matters now is the day of the 2023 lottery. That's really it.
Yep.
So anyways.
Totally. I mean, that is all that matters from here, until lottery date. I think we've pretty much recapped it well. I mean, again, I will add one more thought on, because we are only, next October will be LaMelo extension season, and we'll just have to see where the team is at that point. I do think that slightly overpaying Jalen McDaniels on the wing and drafting in the top 3, Jalen McDaniels was not going to help us win 2 or 3 more games this year. I mean, he's 25, he's a 25-year-old wing. I mean, he's a good player. And if he is going to help you win that much more, you just don't play him as much. But having him on the roster and adding a top 3 or top 4 pick, I just think that has a better – that's going to land better with LaMelo and LaMelo's camp and what he wants next in his NBA career, rather than what Charlotte did today. And that's the real big disappointment from today. Not only today and what exactly happened in the return, but looking forward. It's going to be hard to replace that kind of tool, that kind of asset on a guy that it was exactly on the age curve that you would want on this roster. The one disappointing factor. But we move on. You guys ended it perfectly. It all comes down to the NBA lottery now, and as Drayson is screaming in the background, I think he just screamed Wemby. So that's what we're playing for now. Any closing thoughts?
They just got to get a vision, man. I won't go down the rabbit hole. We've beat this drum too many times before, but just they got to get a vision. What's the plan? What's the vision? And how does the lottery pick fit into that? Because they just got it. Right now, they feel rudderless, and it's time for them to get a little bit more direction with where this thing is going, as they try to build now for the second time around LaMelo, because that's what today officially signifies, the second attempt to put a roster around this guy. What's the plan?
Well said. That's a perfect way to end it. All right. Well, Lee, BG, be good. RR, you're in the background. Thank you, sir. We will see